know her best as a Tony Award nominated producer, a 3-time Emmy nominated producer, an actress, a songwriter, but you may know her best for producing shows like Anastasia, Be More Chill, Company, and so many more. I am so pleased and honored to present Mia Moravis as my guest on My World with Stories podcast.
Scream, you love. Thank you, Mia, to bring me home. Past
started into like putting yourself into theater?
I was raised in Dunoon, Argyll County, Scotland, and my mom was a concert pianist, and they had asked her to play the Christmas pageant in Glasgow. And so she said yes. And I went along with her because my brother and I were, tweens, and they needed an extra fairy. They needed a lead fairy to lead the fairies and elves out to run around Santa Claus. And so my mother pointed at me and said, my daughter will do it. And so I went along with it. And then on opening night of the pageant, what happened was I was standing there in the tutu and in the leotard and everything. And I could see my mother, playing the piano, and vamping and waiting for me to run on. And it was my entrance, and I just got really, really scared. But then I looked at her face and she went, come on, So I skipped out and ran around Santa Claus, and everybody else followed. and it was a success. So that was my first appearance on stage. And then once I got over the fear of that, I must say it was easy to keep going.
What made you want to do producing?
Well, I will say this, the muses, the gods, and the deities brought me to Broadway as a producer, not a performer. And I said, you know what? It's Broadway, so I'm going to do it. And my mentor on Broadway and my dear friend, Van Deen, the owner of Broadway Records, he is the one who introduced me to how one produces on Broadway, because we are both voting members of the Grammys, and that's how we met during the 2014-15 season. And so later on that year, we had met because of Matilda on Broadway. He carried the cast recording, and we saw that show twice. All of us just really loved it. And then that's how I met him. And then 3 months later, he was producing an album called Rockin' Midsummer Night's Dream. And it was for casts of young performers in Newtown, Sandy Hook, as a means of helping that community. And I became an executive producer of that album. And then 5 months after that, we were on the phone on December 5th. I was sitting in the car and he was telling me, I said, what else are you working on right now? It was 6 words really. What else are you working on? And he told me Anastasia Broadway. And I said, well, tell me what that is and tell me what it means to produce. And I just sat in the car. It was a cold winter night, but I was not going to get out of that car until I didn't want to lose the signal when I was talking to him. And so he told me, and I said, you know what? I think I'm ready. I think I can do this. And if you'll have me. And he said, well, of course. And it all worked out really lovely. So Anastasia Broadway was my first Broadway show. We were on the red carpet and everything because they sent out an invitation to the producers, when they had opening night, a VIP invitation, and they said, feel free to dress in Russian or French 1920s couture. So I did. All of us on our team did, and our producing team, and we ended up in one of the Anastasia opening night photos in Playbill. So it was one of those really crazy dreams come true. Before I started working on Broadway, I was, producing community and regional theater and in New England. And Shakespeare in the Park in New Hampshire. And it was really a good training ground for what it means to be a producer of a show. There's some similarities between performing in a show and producing a show. And those similarities I call ambassadorships, because whether you're performing or producing, you're an ambassador for that playwright. You're an ambassador for the show. You're an ambassador. A performer would be an ambassador to their character, to the director, to their casting crew, and other. If you just take out the character aspect of it, producer is an ambassador for all of that as well, to make sure that the show meets the intent of the playwright and playwrights and directors and the musical director, the everybody who created the show, and then that the reason you put up the show, you're an ambassador for that as well.
What's the difference between producing and performing? Can you explain the difference?
With producing, you're involved in myriad aspects of the show. Like, for instance, when I was a producer in regional and community theater, you would be the one that would pull all of the elements together. You would work with the director to help, recruit a cast for the show, and the crew for the show, like the lighting designer and the costumer and the set designer and all of that. And you'd work with finding a venue for the show and working with the people there, the staff there, to how tickets will be sold and how, and you'll work with marketing to make sure how will we have outreach so that people hear about the show and want to come to the show. So with the producer, you really end up working on all aspects of the show in that way. When you're an executive producer, you bring money to the show as well, and you may or may not be involved in those in as many aspects. When you perform in a show, your responsibility, as I say, is to be an ambassador for the playwright, for the character, for the creative people, the people who wrote the music, that, and also to the director and their vision for the show. And the responsibility is a little more centered on you, because you have lines to learn, you have direction to take, you have to form this character coming from your own experience, and, in any way that you dive into yourself to create a character with the director's intent in mind. And of course, whoever wrote it. And so I would say that when you're a performer, of course you must give on stage. You must be part of all the working parts that make that show be presented the way the director intends. And you must be there for your castmates. You must be there. There's expectations on you a lot. You must be where you're designated to catch your light. You must impart what the director intends. You must make sure that your costuming is as the costume designer intended. Your responsibility is to everyone on stage with you. By the time the curtain goes up, your responsibility is that every time you're on that stage, you're doing your part. And you have to, you're flying by the seat of your pants a little bit, when you're an actor, because anything can happen in live theater. Some of the responsibilities are the same, and there are indeed differences. When you're a producer, you're dealing with the whole team. Mm-hmm. A little bit more than when you're on stage and have to memorize your lines, and your songs and all that.
What is like a day like of being a producer?
Oh gosh. Well, the first thing is that time is a fluid dynamic. Your day can start depending on what shows you're living, so to speak. So for instance, we have a show that's going to be opening in Australia. The time difference between Australia and us is vast. We have 2 shows right now in the London's West End, so they're 5 hours ahead. With other aspects of our lives, we're dealing with award shows, so we're dealing with musicians, and we're dealing with other people and other creatives in Los Angeles, and they're 3 hours behind. So when you may say to yourself, oh, it's 9 o'clock at night here on the East Coast. I think I'm going to chill now. It's only 6 o'clock on the West Coast. And when you haven't even woken up yet, the London's West End is already awake. Australia is already awake, you know. And so, and in many parts of the world, it's already tomorrow. And so that is, the time is a very fluid dynamic, I would say. And then what you're predominantly doing is you're checking in with the lead producers of the show. You keep an eye on the dailies. You keep an eye on what's going, especially now, I must say, we're keeping an eye on what's happening as it pertains to the pandemic all over the world, and how it can affect any shows that we have, how we must, and you know, of course, we want to have safety protocols in place so that casts that are coming back to Broadway and to these shows are going to be all right and safe, and our audience will be safe, and the people who work in the theaters are safe, and everybody's safe. And that's a big consideration, more so than it was, say, 2 years ago. I mean, everybody, of course, you want to be safe, but there's this whole other thing that's going on. So those situations are upon you as well now. And also keeping in touch with investors, people whom you brought to the show, who invest in the show, and they really enjoy those shows, and that's what their passion is with those shows. And you have to be in close touch with them too, so that they understand what's going on. And then, you know, it does help if immensely, of course, because some of the contracts when the shows go to Broadway are 85 pages long, you know, and so you have to be able to move in and out of how each situation may vary. I also have a show opening off Broadway. It's Bedlam's Persuasion, produced in association with me. And so we're, you know, making sure those safety protocols are in place, because that opens on the 11th of September. And so, and then after that, we have Jagged Little Pill opening October 21st. It'll open in Australia in September. Company is coming back to Broadway in November for previews. It'll open December 9th. That's happening a month earlier than we originally thought. I have other shows that will be now extended into 2022. So these are all the things you're dealing with, and as it pertains to the shows. And also you have your own things that you're dealing with. Like I produce and direct audio theater, and where you can hear it, but you can't see it. And it's, we just had a show, an audio theater piece on Amazon and Audible as of, I think, the 22nd of July. It's called Many Down by Sarah Rose Kearns, and it takes place in a specific night of Jane Austen and her sister Cassandra's life. And it's a work of fiction, and we made that into audio theater. So these things are happening as well. You know, you have your own things that you're working on, you know, regardless of the shows that you're in. And some producers and some investors, you know, have jobs in their own right. They may or may not be in entertainment. Most are, but sometimes they're not.
What was it like being nominated for a Tony Award and not like being an actor?
It was really a lovely thing, because the first time I saw the Tonys, I was 20 years old. I was house sitting for a friend in Boston, and I thought, wow, look at that. What is, oh my gosh, what is that? Because I was raised overseas, you know, I didn't know about the Tonys too much, but I was starting to know more and more because I went to college here, of course, and some high school here. And I just remember being so enthralled with it. And, you know, I'd been involved in, you know, watching my mother and, you know, what she did, but that was more on the music side. So, and I loved music, you know. We were in Britain when they called it the British, you know, before the British invasion came to America. We were there when it was all Britpop, and it was wonderful in the 60s. And so to be 40 years later, I'll say it, you know, a Tony nominee is just something that feels incredible, regardless of how I which aspect of theater it's in. Jagged Little Pill is nominated for Best Musical. And so this was also my first show above the title, where your name is above the title of the show on the posters, and and so that's an accomplishment too. And so that's how all that occurred. And for the rest of my life, I'll be a Tony nominee. And I would like to say, we didn't have, I don't want to sound like, an old, soul per se, but we didn't have the internet yet. We didn't have ways to meet people that we have now. And, and hence, like I say, I met Van Deen, my Broadway mentor and my partner, because of being able to have access to him on the internet and correspond. We didn't have that, when I first saw the Tonys, when I was 20. And so it's just really a gift all the way around.
So when people are auditioning for like shows that you produce, are you in the room where it happens, or is that not something you do?
Usually, if we're talking about a Broadway show, it depends on the lead producers, and it depends on when we are brought in to produce the show. But we do attend, even if the show's already cast, we do attend all of the workshops, all of the previews prior to Broadway, out of town runs rather, and all of that. So we have, for instance, Jagged Little Pill. I just keep deferring to that because it's easy to me to remember everything. Jagged Little Pill was opened at ART, American Repertory Theater in Boston, Cambridge. And for instance, Little Dancer, which is coming in 2022, which is another Aronson Flaherty, which work, which Anastasia was, that had its out of town run in Seattle in April of 2019. It's a beautiful show. And so we go to all of those things. And then sometimes in other aspects of things, like for instance, I'm casting right now. And I was involved in being told, about the casting situation with other shows off Broadway and such. So it really just depends on when you come into the fold. I've been invited to see some auditions and predominantly workshops.
Also, are an Emmy nominated producer.
Yes.
What is that like besides doing the Tonys?
That's for television. I worked at a PBS station for years and years, a PBS member station. And sometimes we would produce things that were live, and we would shoot them that way. And other times we would, and then you're on the fly. You've got a technical director who's telling which camera to go where and everything. And you have to make sure all those duckies are in a row. And a lot of times you are shooting performances, especially with the PBS work that I did, you're shooting performances which are occurring. And then you contact those people and say, you'd like to make a show around it. And sometimes they come to you and you partner to make a show around it. And so when you shoot those things live for air later, then you shoot it, you capture the footage, you edit it together, and you put it out over the satellite, the PBS satellite, and everybody sees it all over the country, and even and a lot of times all over the world because of other distributions. And then other times you have studio shoots where it's very predictable what's going to happen, and you're in total control of those. My Emmy nominations came from 2 national arts. There was a series called National Arts, and we did the La Jolla Chamber Music Festival. So that was what they call a remote shoot, where you have to go out of town and capture everything there and come back and edit. And we also did the Santa Fe Arts Festival, Chamber Music Festival, and that was an arts festival in Santa Fe. And that was the second nomination out of that series. And then there was another nomination for a film I did myself called Los Amigos Invisibles, The Making of Arepa 3000. It was a world music documentary of Los Amigos Invisibles, the group. And that was a nomination where I had done all of that myself. You know, I had a crew and everything, but that was my origination. It wasn't the PBS stations. And that received that went all over. PBS picked it up and took it. And then there was another one I did called another film I did, a world music documentary called Seeking Heat. And it was about the international artists on David Byrne's Luakabab label. And Discovery People in Arts picked that up. So that went all over the world. And so then I said, then I won a gold special jury prize at World Fest Houston for that one. And I said, okay, I'm retiring from filmmaking now. Because at that time, you know, we weren't using video much at all. You were still shooting on film, processing the film, cutting the negative and everything. It was very, very expensive and could really, you know, make you make you go, oh gosh, when will the film be over? You know, and but it was a joyous time, and that's how those Emmy nominations took place.
What's the difference between like doing TV work and then like live theater? Like, what's the whole difference of producing that kind of material?
In television work, as I said, especially if you're not capturing other works, but you're capturing your own works that you produce yourself and write yourself, and you know, as it pertains to the PBS station or an individual, you're a little more in control of what you're going to capture, and because you have storyboards and you make sure that you know that your intent for the show is exactly adhered to. When you're shooting live theater, and you know, when you're going to turn it into a show, you know, especially at the level of Broadway, for instance, you know, you're going to get a very crisp, clean show. Indeed, it is live theater, and anything can happen though. And so there is that element of, ooh, let's just hope all the set pieces work. Let's just hope the lights work. And you know, you don't really worry about it too much, but you release some you release some control over what's going to happen, because you're capturing the work of others. And I mean control in the purest way, not weird control. But you're not subject to the caprice of the muses as much when you're in the studio, or you know, doing a set piece of work, or of a play or a show per se, or a sports cast or something like that, where you're showing repeat footage, you know, and as opposed to live theater or live events at all. For instance, the Olympics, right? That just
Yeah. Are you also a songwriter?
I am.
Yeah. Can you explain how that whole process, you know, goes?
Yes. Other than being, you know, a performer and running around Santa Claus when I was little, I became predominantly after that. I kind of took a big break from acting and predominantly started writing songs. And I would say I was into that I really started to do that a lot in my late 20s and early 30s. And then I would just go to a studio and record my own songs. I didn't have any studio equipment. So I would go to a studio and say, I need a guitar player, I need this, I need that. And they would bring it together, and I'd go in and they'd record my song for me. And something said to me, you know, I should also get just the music, you know, take my voice out and get a track with just the music in it. And that's how I started having my theme songs used in some PBS shows, because the producers, in particular Peter Marshall, who I worked with a lot, would use my music, those tracks, for theme songs for his shows that he was producing. And then that meant that I was able to join ASCAP, American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. And then that's how I was able to be approved by special committee in the Grammys to vote in the category of in the fielding category of composing and arranging. So that was kind of what happened. I would write my songs, I'd go into the studio to produce them. And, sometimes they didn't go anywhere. Sometimes I could get them on the radio, and then other times, they sat for a while. I had some beautiful Celtic pieces. I had a Celtic EP called Dunoon, which is the town I was raised in Scotland. And those songs literally they sat for 25 years. And then now they're released on Gotham Records, and you can find them everywhere. Gotham Records UK picked them up. So, so what I would say to people is definitely create what you want to create, and don't worry, sit back and relax. Don't hold on so tightly that you can't see straight. If they don't have what seems a purpose to you now, they definitely will later. And that's the beauty of it. Sometimes you can't do everything at once. And so you just have to have patience with yourself and trust that you're making beautiful things.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people that want to go into the field of like producing and acting?
For producing, I would say make sure that you have a true desire to understand the business aspect of things. I have some of that too. Music is a business, and that kind of helped me open up to how things work. One of the greatest ways that I became more acclimated to the music business, other than my songs being used as theme songs, was may he now rest in peace, but Tony Holenkovich was a composer for John Walsh and America's Most Wanted, and in his own right. And he was from the Boys from Illinois, the band back in the 80s. It was on Epic Records and all of that. So he was already kind of famous. And he did a lot of work in television. And he taught me a lot about the business aspect of that, what a contract looks like, what's in the contract. Do you understand what you're reading? That's really important if you're going to produce, to understand what the ramifications are of every agreement, because the stakes are so high, especially when you get money from other people for a show. So that sounds like it might not be ultra fun, but it's actually very, very interesting. And it's very good to have a body of knowledge like that, because that body of knowledge goes with you everywhere, into other types of creations. And so I really appreciate that. I would say that also love what you're producing. Don't produce for the sake of producing. Love what you're producing. There's many things to produce. There's many art forms to produce. Pick the one you love the most, and it will always make you happy. And as far as acting goes, I would say make sure that when you audition, you're ready. Make sure you know who you are. Make sure you know what's expected when you walk into the room, or the Zoom, as they say, or your self-tape. And also, it's really important in all of this work, and I would say as an actor too, go for the parts that have passion within you, that would create passion within you. Don't go for a part for the sake of a part. Don't say, I'm going to try to get that role because, it's not really me, but, do what I think that the way to stay strong and have vivacity is to remember that you count too, and doing the parts of it all that you love is what's going to keep it exciting and make you successful. If you don't feel that excitement, it will start to show, and it will start to take a toll on you, just like anything. As far as acting and producing and anything in the entertainment world, sometimes all these moving parts are a little tough, and sometimes it's tough, and sometimes it's easy. I would always say, remember to always be kind, because everybody's trying to reach the same point with every single production. Everybody's trying to get to the same place, whether you're acting or you're lighting designer or a crew, your set, or a musician or a producer, any of that. Always be kind, because the only way that everybody can get to the same place is if everybody's listening to each other. And you definitely have people you must listen to. If you're an actor, listen to the director. it's always okay to say, I'm not sure I understand. Of course, please tell me so that I, do what you envision for this role. But it's always important to be kind. And I always say, people say to me, if I visit where I used to live or something, they say, what's it like? And I say, well, it's different. It's different because there's not just, and I say it like this, and this is kind of, direct, but I say there's not 27 people who wish that they could do what you do. There's not 270. There's not 2,700. There's 27,000 people who wish that they could do what you do. And if you are not easy to work with, there's a lot of people behind you who are. So it's really important to keep that good place in your heart.
What's next for you, like with Broadway returning and stuff?
Well, we have off Broadway. We have Persuasion opening at Bedlam, directed by Eric Tucker and written by the play written by Sarah Rose Kearns, and that's just been cast. So we're very excited. You can find that on Broadway World. We in the next after that would be Jagged Little Pill opening on the 21st here, and in September in Australia, the tour. And then after that, we have Company, and we have some audio theater coming out as well. So all these duckies are lining up again, and it's a very, very exciting time. I want everyone to be happy and healthy, and all the muses, deities, and God's willing, and everybody's following safety protocols. Everything will happen on time.
And you're on social media, so if people want to follow you, where could they find you?
Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Mia Moravis, and it's MIA MORAVIS, Moravis. And on Facebook, I'm Mia.Moravis, facebook.com/Mia.Moravis. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. And that has a really long URL, but so far nobody except one man has my same last name, MORAVIS. So that's how you can find me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Oh, well, gosh, thank you. I'm really honored to have met you, and your cousin Valerie and I are good pals, and I feel really lucky to be here with you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much for listening and watching to My World with Stories podcast. For more info, go to Instagram and Facebook at My World with Stories podcast, and make sure that you give us a like, a subscribe, a follow, whatever you want. Do it because we love you guys so much, and thanks for hanging with us. Bye!